Today, we are going beyond the SBOM and welcoming CycloneDX's xBOM, covering the SaaSBOM, ML-BOM, and CBOM. Before we jump into that, I really want to quickly introduce ReversingLabs to those who are new to us. We are protecting over 20% of the Fortune 100 from finance, high-tech, energy, government, manufacturing, and healthcare. We also have 60 cybersecurity companies who are trusting our insights to to bolster their products. At our core is scalability, insight, and threat intelligence, all living on our platform called Spectra Core. We have the fastest and most accurate threat insights and risk analysis. We can ingest massive volumes of files, huge files, and an entire software application. It's actually how we're able to generate our own xBOMs from fully compiled binaries. As I mentioned before, this is all achievable via Spectra Core, which offers complex binary analysis, deconstructing files in seconds or minutes, and it's also leveraging the largest threat repository of over 422 billion files. Here you see some awards that we've received in the past couple of years that we're proud of. We're also contributors to the Verizon DBIR report, something that I personally am especially proud of, as I have been reading that for the entirety of my cybersecurity career. On the agenda today, we'll be covering what is the xBOM. Again, I know we're throwing a lot of acronyms at you. Let's level set on that, make sure we know what we're talking about. Then we'll address the question is, do we need more bombs? There's a growing list of these. What are they for and why? We'll cover some of the primary formats, CycloneDX and SPDX. Then Jasmine will do a deep dive onto three of the emerging xBOMs, the most popular new xBOMs, the SaaSBOM, the CBOM, and the ML-BOM. And then we'll talk a little bit about what it means to go beyond the xBOM. So in order to frame up what is the xBOM, let's just really level set even further on the SBOM, which in the beginning there was the SBOM, the software bill of materials, which is effectively a list of ingredients within a software binary. It's useful to have this, but it has its limitations. One is that there are things that software packages contain or that they reach out to, services they leverage that are not within the scope of the SBOM, which is why the SBOM has evolved into the xBOM. And with that, Jasmine, could you tell us a little bit about the difference between the SBOM and the xBOM to help us understand what the xBOM really is?
Okay, sure. So if you go to the next slide. So again, like Dan said, in the beginning there was software, and then people decided, hey, I really need to know what's in this software. And so we came up with this software bill of materials, your open source, third-party components, anything that's in there. But the thing is, our software is becoming more connected in the world. So it's reaching out and touching more and more services. It's, getting smarter. So you're seeing a lot of machine learning being embedded. So this is why we need to have these more and more views into what actually is in the software. And that's really the difference. There's the SBOM, and then you have all of this other stuff in there as well. And Dan's going to dive into a little bit more about why we need all these things. But yeah, that's basically the difference. In terms of what we support at ReversingLabs, this is a quick flash. We'll be able to tell you software components, services, whether there's cryptography in there, whether there are ML models in there. And I think pretty uniquely, we will also tell you what behaviors that software is exhibiting. So that's it. All right, so Dan, why do we need all these things?
Yes. Do we need more bombs? The answer is yes. And I have 4 reasons we need them. This extended bill of materials is going to help us better prepare, to help us comply, to help us verify and streamline. So what do I mean by that? When it comes to preparing, AI and quantum computing threats are growing, becoming more likely and present and soon to be realized. With the CBOM, we have insight into our cryptographic assets, which will soon be under threat by quantum computing. In fact, there's specific mandates out there that are advising organizations or mandating organizations to prepare for these quantum threats, and the CBOM, the cryptography bomb, is your means of doing that. The SaaSBOM ensures visibility into external services that software relies on, reducing risk from third-party integrations. And actually, one of those can be AI or ML. So you have the ML-BOM, which is going to tell you about the ML models that are present within a package, but oftentimes these software packages are calling on ML via API as a service. And the SaaSBOM is actually going to help you with that. So with the ML-BOM and the SaaSBOM combined, you've actually covered all your bases when it comes to AI, which leads us to the ML-BOM, which identifies potentially malicious models before they can be integrated into your products or deployed into your organization. So if we're really going to prepare for these coming threats, we need to go beyond the SBOM to have those. Compliance mandates. These are expanding as well. The ML-BOM is going to help us with the NIST AI risk management framework, the EU AI Act, and the ISO IEC 4201. And the CBOM is going to help with NIST 1838B, which talks directly about quantum computing readiness. It's also going to help us verify the software that is coming into our organization. So when I talk about verify, I'm actually talking about the software consumer, the one who's buying software. Right now, there is an inherent trust model. It relies on questionnaires. It relies on trusting these vendors to provide complete SBOMs. And hopefully, if something's not in the SBOM, make you aware that, hey, now it's got an ML model in it. These actually give you the means as a software buyer to take matters into your own hands with independent and verified tools to understand what's in your software and verify what's in your software. On the other side of the house, as a software producer, it's going to streamline your ability to sell, frankly, your software. If you are a software vendor right now, you know that when you get to the procurement phase and you have an organization who has a definite need and budget for your software and they want to bring that in, all these lawyers and procurement teams suddenly pop their heads up with these very strict requirements on what you need to be able to tell them and show them about your software. And for good reason, I'm not blaming them, but it's often a slow and arduous process. With the ability to generate xBOMs that cover everything, not just the software, but the ML, the cryptographic elements, the SaaS applications, you can really streamline that process and get them the answers they need much more quickly than you could before. There's two primary SBOM and now xBOM formats that businesses are either asking for or generating. One is CycloneDX. It's known for being lightweight, security focused, and prioritizing ease of use and vulnerability management. It's really ideal for teams where streamlined security workflows are a priority. SPDX or SPDX, as I've heard folks call it, has been around a little longer. It's got comprehensive license and compliance management, extensive fields for licensing, copyright, and detailed component relationships. It can be a little bit more complex to implement, but both have actually new versions. CycloneDX has reached 1.6, which includes that CBOM, enhanced machine learning BOM, and ECMA TC54 standardization and industry standardization that ensures user long-term stability and broader acceptance. Here at ReversingLabs, we support both, and CycloneDX in particular is a big proponent of the xBOM and the various xBOMs that are associated with it that Jasmine listed before. SPDX has just introduced 3.0, and when I say just, I mean maybe past 6 months or so, which makes it easy to talk about compliance and security. They have a security profile that integrates VEX, CSAF, CVEs, and vulnerability assessments for comprehensive security intelligence. They also have a licensing profile that streamlines open source compliance with refined licensing information, an AI profile, which, as you could expect, captures AI and ML model metadata for emerging AI governance requirements. And last, they have dataset profiles, which describe data used to train software, such as its type and availability. Both are great options. We're seeing kind of a mix of folks who use one or the other. Here at ReversingLabs, we support both, but I did want to make mention of these two formats and their most recent updates. But today, we're going to focus on three particular xBOMs, ones that CycloneDX really advocates for, and ones that we are offering here at ReversingLabs. And those are the SaaSBOM, the ML-BOM, and the CBOM. I'm going to talk about these in more detail, but while I do, we actually want to launch a poll for the audience. Which of these new xBOMs are you most interested in? And if you even want to chime in on the chat, you can tell us why. But wow, this is great. Love to see all this participation. And Jasmine, we've got interest in all, so we're going to have you cover all three. The SaaSBOM is covering software as a service, as you could expect. And it includes networking service because misconfigured cloud services, insecure APIs, or unprotected data exchanges are bringing risk into the organization, and you need visibility into those. The ML-BOM includes AI and ML models because the rapid adoption of AI and its associated risks are in need of visibility. We need to see what's coming in. We're going to see what we're building, and this is a great tool for that. And then the CBOM, cryptography, includes algorithms, keys, and certificates because of weak algorithms and quantum threats. We are at a near split, 32%, 32%, and 37%. So as such, we're going to appease all of you and provide some details on each. Thank you so much to the audience for your participation in the poll. Jasmine, could you tell us more about the SaaSBOM?
Yes, so it's about software as a service. Now, earlier I said our applications are becoming more connected, and that's true because if you look at any piece of software, it's using a lot of third-party services within the software. If it needs to identify who the users are, guess what? They're not building a user identity service within their software that already exists. So instead, it will use APIs. It would use those means to go out and connect to these other services, which could be, mostly from third parties, right? The interesting one there is the AI and ML, right? So for instance, if I have created some new application and I'm using AI in there, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reaching out and, using a service that's the AI, right? I'm going to reach out and use ChatGPT, APIs, for instance. So what we would need to understand is, well, okay, what exactly are you reaching out to? How are you, what are the dependencies? And that's particularly important on the buyer side, because guess what? If one of these dependent services goes down, or has an outage, or it's breached in some way, that ripples back in and affects your organization and users of that software, right? So this is all about bringing transparency about, okay, I know what's in the software, but I also need to know what else that software is communicating with, because that also poses a risk to the organization. Right? So the CycloneDX has services in their BOM structure, and that's where information will be listed about all these different types of services that would be in software. Okay.
Thanks, Jasmine. I actually really like this graphic that you drew up, because with the SaaSBOM, we finally acknowledge that the risk associated with the software actually goes beyond the ones and zeros of the software itself. So this is the first BOM that says, hey, there's impact that goes beyond what's inside the software. So I really appreciate the graphic for that reason, and thank you for that deep dive. Let's dive into the CBOM. We've got a host of people in the audience who are interested in this one.
Okay, so cryptography. Now, all software tends to use, some sort of algorithms or certificates or protocols and all sorts of other cryptographic materials to keep what should be secret. Okay, so if I'm communicating with one of those services, I'm going to need some certificates, also login information to communicate with that system so that it knows that I'm who I say I am, and it's going to give me access to the data that is behind that service. Same thing as if it's accessing local information, right? You'll want to make sure that those things that let you log in to these other services, or lets you use information within the software, those need to be protected. But unfortunately, the computing world has gotten their hands on this quantum computing, and as usual, the attackers are licking their chops. Hey, if I'm going to be able to break into just about any cryptography algorithm, hash standards that we're using today, then guess what? I can just go collect all the information that's already encrypted and just wait until we can crack it. So they've already made quite a bit of progress towards some of the first set of algorithms that were out there. Now, but we need to keep on our guard. And this is why, most companies are beginning now to think about, well, okay, if I'm going to have to shift all my cryptography technology into something that's more resistant to these new type of attacks, I need to know what it is, where it is in my software, well, how resistant is it already? Right. So if it is fairly resistant and it's protecting information that, in a couple of years, if they crack through it, it's not that critical, or it'll change, or something like that, then, that's less critical. But for longer term data protection, you're going to need something that can withstand these types of attacks. So this is all about preparing, just like Dan was talking about earlier. Why start talking about this now when NIST is saying, 2030? It's because it actually takes a very long time to shift from one cryptography set of technologies to another. I mean, SA1 was around for years, and then we had to switch, but it took about 20 years to actually get that done, right? So, and we are on a much shorter time frame now. So it's this kind of information is critical so that you can basically know what you need to protect, where it is in what software. And if it's a third-party piece of software that you're using, you need to start contacting the vendor and asking them, well, what are your plans? Do you have any plans at all? That's the need for this CBOM. And again, under CycloneDX, underneath their components, they will have a component type that's called cryptographic asset. So you'll be able to see exactly what cryptographic assets are used by each component, right? So again, this is this expanding of what we consider to be a component, right? It's great you know that you have this component in your software, but what cryptographic assets is it actually using?
Thanks, Jasmine. That actually, made me a little bit anxious. 2030 is not that far away. And if it took 20 years last time, yeah, there should be some urgency. And to the person in the chat who wrote this, I have to quote you here. Kicking the crypto can down the road is not a plan. That is, those are words to live by. That's awesome. I'm going to steal that. You can feel free to reach out to me. That's just great. And I think what can be a plan is ensuring that you have a CBOM so that you understand what you have and where, and you have your head around it. That's awesome insight, Jasmine, and thanks, David, in the chat for that. That's awesome. So let's do the last one, the ML-BOM. Tell us about this one.
Okay, so we said earlier that if I'm using a ML service online, that information will be in the SaaSBOM, right? However, there are situations where people are bundling in their machine learning model, their pickle files, their PyTorch files, right in the software that they're delivering to you, or right embedded in a container that they're delivering to you. And that's usually the case for people who need to have the software running within, a closed environment, and they don't want a lot of, reaching out to the world. So we should be treating that as just another component, right? That's exactly how CycloneDX thinks about it. It's a component type, it's a machine learning model, so those pickle files. The thing is, they can be embedded without the vendor actually telling you that it's in there, right? So that's why I say it's not obvious all the time that you have a machine learning model. And guess what? All those European regulations are saying, yeah, you need to know whether it's there or not. So if I'm a purchaser, I'm like, well, how would I know, right? That's what this ML-BOM is all about. It will tell you if there's a machine learning model in there, what it is, where it came from, some provenance information, that sort of thing. Okay. But again, just so knowing that there's an ML-BOM, there's a machine learning model in your software is the first step, it's the first level of visibility. But the next thing you have to do is consider, well, okay, if that's in there, what kind of threats am I going to be, or risks am I taking on by bringing that in, right? To go to the next slide.
Yeah, let's talk about those threats.
Yeah. So again, and we see this in particular with those pickle files that get embedded. The thing with those is that as they are unpacked and start to run, they'll just run, and anything that's been embedded in there will just execute, right? So an attacker who has broken into and has modified or tampered with that pickle file can do all sorts of things. So you need to start thinking about, well, okay, is this thing able to create processes or access certain systems, or just have network capabilities that you're not expecting to have, right? Those are the sorts of things that as you're deserializing, if they start executing those types of processes, then you have a problem, right? So those are the sorts of things you need to actually start looking for. Okay. I'm seeing a comment about poison pickled. Yes, it can be very bad in certain contexts, right? Which is why our ReversingLabs, our first set was to tackle those pickle files specifically, and we created a bunch of threat hunting policies looking specifically for those. We also have done, our research team has also actually identified some bad pickle files in the wild, actually on Hugging Face, that got through their malware detection program. So again, it's something that's evolving over time, and we just expect to see more and more different types of attacks. So that's what our research team is going to focus on.
Cool. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Feel free to check out more details. We're doing a lot of investigation on these pickle files. It is not the most bulletproof format, and unfortunately, the threat actors are learning that quite fast. So Jasmine, can you kind of show us, what it might look like to implement an ML-BOM use case?
Okay, so this is an anonymized version of what one of our customers is actually doing, right? So they're a large SaaS provider. Their whole strategy hinges on building these new models and providing them as services. So they want to check two things, right? Because their developers are going out to the open source world and saying, hey, I'm going to try this, model from Hugging Face, and they're going to try downloading it and using it to create their new model. So we will analyze both anything that they're downloading. Then once they're finished developing and they have packaged the model, they want to make sure that nothing untoward has been included without their knowledge. So they send us the package, and usually it's a container that ends up being pretty large, because as you can imagine, it's packing in all the data that they are including in the model itself, right? So we unpack those, we create the safe report, and then based on which policies they are interested in, they will determine whether it's safe or not. So if it's safe, they'll go ahead, okay, yep, this is good. We can go ahead, we can offer the model to our customers, we can ship containers with the model off to customers. But we're also going to need to prove to, whichever auditor is going to come sniffing around, and they will, that we actually tested this thing. So what they also do is they use our safe archive. So every time they've scanned something, they also send an archive. They also create an archive of the report, what was analyzed, what version of our engine is actually used to do the analysis, so that they have all that information in case somebody else is pounding on their GRC team to get answers or information. Now, if it is deemed not safe, then it's back to the software development team and help them, they can then go through the report, look at exactly what we found, and that will help them figure out where and when these, suspicious behaviors got added into their model or their container. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. It's great to see this kind of put into practice and having a mechanism for becoming aware of the ML models and being able to react if in fact there is an issue. So I want to take a minute to talk about going beyond the xBOM. We talk about that a lot here at Reversing Labs because as much as we do advocate for building and collecting SBOMs and xBOMs and making sure that they are complete and full, one thing that they lack is an inherent understanding of the risk associated with those components. You actually have to take another step. Once you have your inventory of what is included in your software, or in the case of an SaaSBOM, what your software is reaching out to, you then want to extrapolate further to understand the risk that's associated with it. Through a process that I mentioned at the beginning and was touched upon in this here previous slide, called complex binary analysis, you can take an entire software package, a complete fully compiled binary, run it through complex binary analysis. And not only do you get that SBOM or xBOM, you'll also surface any associated risk based on those components and how they're behaving as an entire system. So you'll see if there's malware present, even in the absence of a CVE. You see if the software has been tampered with, such that it's behaving in a way that it shouldn't or wasn't in the last and should be investigated in the most recent update. You'll see if there's hardening gaps, opportunities to improve the security of an application. Of course, you'll see if there's vulnerabilities. You'll even be able to prioritize those vulnerabilities based on exploitability, so you can know which need to be patched today and which you can wait until tomorrow for. You'll surface any secrets and any licenses. So what you'll have is a primary control that can analyze any application, VM, or container in minutes with no requirement for source code. And this is a great benefit for those who are producing software, as well as those who are consuming and buying software. For the producer, we absolutely advocate for you making sure that everything that goes into your CI/CD pipeline is curated, is clean, is safe. We advocate for you hardening that pipeline as much as possible. But unfortunately, the reality is that even if you have pristine components going in, and even if you do your best to secure that CI/CD pipeline, there are scenarios, and look at some of the marquee breaches of our age, supply chain attacks of our age, wherein what comes out the other end actually has problems. And this offers you a means of having a final build exam that ensures that what comes out is also still secure. It also gives the buyer a tool, so they don't need source code. They don't need any of that. They can take that finished product, run it through complex binary analysis, and get that confidence. And in both scenarios, it's going to deliver a complete SBOM and xBOM, inclusive of that SaaSBOM, CBOM, ML-BOM that we talked about extensively today. Additionally, these reports can be shared. So I talked about some of those pain points that the xBOM alleviates. If you're a buyer, it allows you to get that visibility into what you're buying and not have to rely on your vendor and having to trust your vendor. As a producer, it allows you to answer all those questions of your consumer in a rapid fashion. And it also allows you to archive those tools for compliance. Jasmine already kind of talked about a use case here, but I just want to talk about when you put it in practice, here's what it'll look like. If you're a vendor anytime that you, or sorry, well, I want to put it in practice for an enterprise buyer. So if you consume software, you run it through that complex binary analysis engine, you get all of your associated BOMs, which you can archive, which you can look at, but you also get that risk report. That's called a safe report, which tells you of any risks that are present. That'll give you an actionable plan. Hopefully, you have squeaky clean software, which you can improve and deploy. Potentially, there's some risks here. Maybe they're within your risk appetite, but still problematic. You want to tell your vendor about it and hope that they improve it for the next time. And we'll actually do a whole webinar on how to get your vendor to improve their software. It can be done, believe it or not. We can tell you about companies who do this. And also, hopefully this doesn't happen, but it does. You definitely want to be aware you could see a scenario where you want to stop the process of procuring a product or deploying an update or patch because it has the presence of something that you absolutely cannot have in your environment, like malware. Within our product at ReversingLabs Spectra Assure, you can see all those bill of materials easily. This is the homepage, the sample summary. It tells you exactly what's present in your software from a risk perspective, but it also can give you that full bill of materials. So you can click in and look at the software, services, ML models, or cryptographic elements that might be present and get a complete understanding of what's there. I'll go and spend some time answering some questions after this. But before I do, for the folks who are very interested in diving further, because we could spend all day on this topic, we have a lot of assets around the xBOM. We have blogs, we have white papers, we have other webinars we've done. We actually had Steve Springett on. He's the chair of CycloneDX and the standard at OWASP. He had some great insights, and I encourage you to check that one out. It's primarily him talking about future-proofing SBOMs with CycloneDX, and since this webinar, we've actually enacted some of those sentiments. We also have a white paper that's going to really dive into going beyond the SBOM, going beyond in two dimensions, in the dimension of what the BOM covers, so that's the xBOM, but also going beyond in terms of surfacing the risk associated. So again, whole host of assets that you can dive into to learn more. But if you actually just want to chat about it, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk about it further and how you can implement some of these practices at your business. We also have more coming webinars. Jasmine, I'm lucky to have joining me once again, where we'll dive into the 2025 market guide for software supply chain security. And then I'll be joining Daniel Meisler on a webinar where we're going to dive into AI and its impact on the software supply chain. So I encourage you to, if you found this valuable, to check out some of our coming webinars. With that, I first want to say, Jasmine, is there anything you wanted to add, anything that I didn't cover, or should we just dive into some of these questions?
Let's dive into some questions.
Cool. So the first question I have, this one should be pretty easy, is what format do you support? Well, as mentioned before, we are keeping up with the latest and greatest for SPDX 3.0 and Cyclone 1.6. Those are exportable as JSON, and that's important because one of the important things about these standards is that they be machine readable, and that's important to us. At the same time, though, our UI, Spectra Assure, allows you to investigate and explore and filter and sort all of these components as well. So you can explore them within Spectra Assure or export them in any of those formats. Anything you want to add to that, Jasmine, or did I cover it?
You covered it.
Cool. The other question is, do your SBOMs include those risks that you talked about? They do not. So we have SBOMs that stay true to those formats. Again, that's important to comply with the formats. We do not build the formats. We appreciate the work that OWASP and CycloneDX are doing, and we are adherent to those so that you can have those. Where we go beyond the SBOM and surfacing the risks is in what we call the safe report. And this is something that you can explore via our UI or share securely with your vendors or buyers. You can share that. It can be password protected, it can be time bound, and they can look at all the risks that are actually further associated with those. A question that came in, a great one, is how and where would you start as a regulator enforcing SBOMs or xBOMs? Could you provide some more clarity on that question? When you say a regular regulator, are you saying you're a third party trying to enforce this on your uh, on other organizations, or could you provide some more details on that one?
Yeah, because if you are under a regulation and you're required, for instance, well, I don't know what the new administration has done and yet, but it used to be that you had, if you were selling to the federal government in the US, you were required to provide an SBOM. And they actually went out and specified, the level of software, um, the level of details, what those details are, and then they provided some dates, right? Okay, you need to provide it by such and such a date, and they gave people time to prepare and get the information. The initial thing was also they were also expecting you to have that that you don't have it complete. But the first step, of course, is just getting it produced in a form that can be shared. And over time, get the accuracy down to where it actually needs to be, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thanks, Jasmine. Um, Another question came in are there any thoughts on SBOMs related to specifics in industrial control systems for inventory? And it looks like you've dived into it. So ICS will actually have in a lot of cases, the same components as a typical IAT infrastructure. So you'll actually be covering a lot of what's in your ICS via an SBOM, ML-BOM, etc. But I'll actually go a little off script here, and I'll bring up here's CycloneDX's authoritative guide to SBOM. And in here, they list the xBOM capabilities that they are pushing for. And included in those is, as you mentioned, the hardware bill of materials. And so that might help with your ICS. And you might see some others here that might be relevant as well. But again, an ICS is not the components within are not mutually exclusive to the components within any other software packages. So all those BOMs you've been using are already going to be helpful for that use case.
And if you're looking for examples of an industry, look at the medical device industry, right? Because they have been creating SBOMs and hardware bombs for several years now. So they would be a good example to follow if you're just beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of this is about compliance, right? So if you're a regulating body and you want to enforce this, you're going to start going to companies as part of their audits and saying, show me all your bill of materials. Tell me all the software you're using, and I would like to see an associated SBOM, xBOM, whatever it might be. And yeah, it's very much very important in the in HIPAA, in hospitals. CBOM is going to be important there. Absolutely. All right, well, the questions are slowing down. They actually come to me in two areas, so I want to be sure I'm thorough, and I found them both. Um, yeah, great. If there's nothing else, I would like to thank you all in the audience for the time you spent with Jasmine and I today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your feedback, your interaction, your questions, your poll answering, your attention. I know time is money, and the fact that you spent it with us means a lot to me personally. And then Jasmine, I want to thank you. Your expertise and insight is always so well appreciated. I look forward to doing the next one with you.
It'll be awesome.
Awesome. All right, folks, with that, we will say have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.